Yep. Well, and you know, I've listened to everything Paul has said about this whole estuary building thing,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe I'm reading between the lines, but what I'm hearing from him, well, Tyler's joining.
So yesterday, I was just working on the SB undergraduate verification worksheet stuff.
Hey, Charlie.
Still,
Hey, what's going on, brother?
made a lot of progress on that though.
I got a work call, so I'm just gonna listen in for the first like 20 minutes, but then I can talk.
Okay.
See what else needs to be done with that. Drawing closer to the finish.
Well, so what I was hearing, and maybe it was me reading between the lines of what he was saying, was like, he was saying my plate is full. Like, I've upgraded from a dinner plate to a platter and it's still full. And like, I want these estuaries to happen, but I need people to get out and do something, right? Because, he doesn't know pastors in every single area of every single state.
Yep.
And he's saying every church needs an estuary, but it can't be him. And that came up in his talk with Sam Adams that just recently got posted, where he said, I don't want to be CEO of Estuary Inc. Like, I'm not starting the estuary. I want it to be spread across multiple different layers.
Yeah.
So when I heard that, I just thought, well, there's the call to action. I can do something instead of just sitting back and listening and waiting,
Yep. Yeah, I'm admittedly, I've been, I've not watched a lot of YouTube in like the past few days. I've been mostly just, I recently just moved myself up to Maine, so that took a couple days, and then I've just been sort of separating myself, I think, a little bit, not like in a negative sense, just like I needed to take some time. And yeah, I haven't watched too much of Paul's videos, but I also think I picked up some of that just because it's either way. I think it's more so like a meta idea rather than something that's um, Paul's. I don't know. It's. I feel like he picked up something from the Discord and was able to sort of more or less name it. And I feel like that's also something that we've been doing on the Discord itself. So,
right? And that's, I've never intended this project to be competition to that. Like I said in my video, I want it to be a place where there's overlap, where people from the main server, which is, it gets clogged at times. And it's hard for new people coming in to really find that place where they can have those meaningful conversations. So I want it to be a place. Hey, what's going on, brother?
Hi, I just saw your invite, so I thought I'd join for 2 seconds and see what was going on.
Just talking about the creation of the Outpost server and why I did it. Where was I at? Forgot what I was saying now.
you were saying talking about competition and how you didn't want it to be
competition. Oh, right. So I want people like you and others from the main server who have been there for a long time to be in the Outpost, so that when people come in from, say, let's say Andrea with the Bangs promotes it and I promote it on my channel and Sam promotes it on his channel, all these multiple channels promote it, I want it to be a place where they can kind of dip their toes in the water and get to know some of the people from the main server before they hop in. Because then if they know some of those people already, then they get into the main server. They've already got a place to have conversation with those people. And those people that they've already had conversation with can say, hey, you know, I can vouch for this person. So it makes it, yes, it adds an extra step, but when you have 1,300 plus members, it can be really hard if you're a brand new person jumping into that server to actually find meaningful conversations with others.
Yeah, I remember. I think it was at the end of one of the Q&As, sort of how there's generally a large collection of people, and we got on the topic of how it seems that it's very actually important that we someone brought up how it would be interesting to have like an introductions channel, so like where people can just sort of introduce themselves, so that people who come in are able to more or less instantly engage, instead of having, so a lot of people will notice that if you don't sort of say hey, welcome, for people when they first come into the server, they're less likely to just initially engage, which was a observation that I think a few people have noticed and I think is important. And yeah, it's sort of going off of like what you're saying about the server, and I think it is important to have that, and then also that section where you're vouching for people.
Right, because I noticed it was easier for me to come in considering I got the invite in a way from Voth. And he had already been around a little bit longer and had conversations with people, so he could say, hey, you know, we've been friends for a few years. Here's, you know, and I invited him in. But not everybody else has that. Some people are just coming in from Paul's channel, or, well, mostly from Paul's channel. And it can be harder for them at first.
Yeah.
Because they don't understand what all this stuff is about. They're not, you know, and then I've seen it where, you know, you'll get the notification that somebody new joined the server, but then nobody engages with them. And they don't know how to take that, and I don't know how well they engage. You know,
Yeah.
and it may be only 2 out of every 10, but still, you know, if those 2 had landed somewhere else and been able to engage with some of the people from the main server before they got all the way in, then it would benefit them more.
Yep. Yeah, I think I'm just sort of looking, I'm just trying to think back. Like, I remember I first came on in like September or something, and it was a while before, like it was a month before I actually really got into the server. So, there's, yeah, there's something to that. And then I think I sort of want to go back to the discussion about the estuary and how you don't want it to be a church, and I think that's a correct direction to go in. And so when Andrew K and I were talking, we both were like, in a sense, how could we utilize, because we're both from the Catholic Church, and so how would we be able to maybe use a different sort of space? Like, because you don't want to have someone, you know, walk into a Catholic church and, you know, talk about those things. Different, just basically, you wouldn't be able to have open discussions, more or less, just from the environment itself. So it's like, for me at the moment, the focus is on how do we generate the correct physical environment if, because we sort of have the digital environment down a bit, because you can try and model for just a meeting, but how do you make that work in the physical world is, I feel like, the biggest uh, biggest hurdle, because
Yeah, and I've been struggling with that too because it's like most Protestant churches have buildings that aren't being used during the week, except for like Wednesdays, or if you go Pentecostal Thursdays, because they do Sunday and Thursday. But they have this building all week that's not being used. But how do you, if you're wanting to sell that idea to the churches, like they've been on board with AA for a while, but how do you sell them this idea of having a meeting place where there's no return on investment? And that's what I keep bringing up because they're going to see it as an outreach ministry, and they're going to expect at some point some return on investment on that. They're going to expect to see some of those people in those meetings show up in the church on Sundays.
Yeah.
And how do you get them to understand that that's not going to be the case? Like Paul just says, well, churches are used to doing this. They're used to planting seeds that they may not ever see anything come from. And it's like, but not all. So you're going to have some places where you can't work with a local church because that's going to be their expectation.
Yeah, I don't think that assumption, I don't think is really true. I feel like most churches expect something, they expect some sort of cycle. So
Right.
I feel like most churches would just think, oh, this is sort of like an evangelizing project or something like that. And that's not what it really is. And then there's, that's like for me, when I'm thinking of my church in New Jersey, there's there would be spaces that we could probably use that wouldn't, that would have a decent physical environment to it wouldn't hinder the conversation. And that's the important part, is having, I feel like if I had it in, if you have it in the main sanctuary with I put post of my church in New Jersey. It's like there's a big cross. There's stained glass windows. People would be like, like normal, like people. They would never walk in, or not normal people, but some people, decent amount of people, uh, that would deter them. So,
Right. And that's the other hard part of it is people outside of a church, getting them to meet inside of a church building, because that's going to raise red flags with them of like, oh, is this an evangelization mission? Like this is not what we signed up for. You know what I mean?
yeah.
And that can be difficult at the very least to get them to want to do that.
Yeah. I think my other main focus is also, how would you market an idea like this? How would you express it accurately? How would you be able to say to people, oh, this is what we plan on doing, but it's in a church, or maybe it's not in a church, but it's like in this sort of area. And I mean, maybe it doesn't have to be, but
The church is the easiest target just because they have the space that's not being used.
Yeah.
Like that's why they're the easiest target. If you're going to sell it, what you have to be able to say is, look, there's people inside of your building already that are having thoughts that they would not bring up in a service because they know that it goes outside the orthodox. let's create a space for both them and people outside of the church to meet and talk through these things. That's the only way that you market that. And, you know, churches, some of them might not be on board with it because they're going to say, well, if we have people from the outside coming in and talking to these people who are inside the church, then, you know, they might dissuade them. They might change their mind, and then we're going to lose members. And that, you know, that's a rational fear to have, because we know what happens to heretics. I mean, it is rational,
Yeah.
but it takes the right person to quote unquote sell it, and it takes the right church to say, yes, we'll be on board with it. So conditions have to be right too. You can't just build an estuary by opening up a small spot to let salt water in and just hope and pray that it mixes with the fresh water correctly. Because that's just, you know, it's bad form. You can't do that. It's got to be the right conditions too. And that's where I see your trouble. What you're saying is like, it's really difficult to make it a physical space if it's going to be in a church.
Yeah.
Don't you have elk halls and Sons of Columbus halls that you can go to and those sort of things? Or are they just too expensive?
Yeah, there's Knights of Columbus, but I feel like I don't know Knights of Columbus too well, and there's like other groups like Opus Dia that maybe, but I don't know those too well, and those would also probably not be as blank slate as I'm thinking, you know.
Basically look for where they're doing yoga classes and do the same. Because that's the sort of place that you find them. I agree with Thought Jenny. I did a pre-estuary Jordan Peterson meetup at my church, and persuading the eldership, even though I am one of the eldership, that it was a reasonable thing to do for our church was quite difficult, and we've moved a long way. We had one guy who represented a good chunk of the church 10 years ago who left us in the end over another issue, but basically if it wasn't totally evangelical Christian, if it wasn't totally, you know, 100% correct, then it shouldn't be in the sacred space of the church. And we're a Baptist with a 1960s build, so it's not exactly the most sacred space in the world anyway. You know, it's not like some Catholic church or Anglican where you've got an altar or anything. The main section is used for creation most of the week. So yeah, it is interesting how difficult it is to allow non-Christians to come into our sacred space, even though we're an evangelistic and evangelical church. Obviously, open and welcome to all. It's not quite true. Going back to your Outpost. Sorry, while I'm whispering for a moment. I thought it was very good what you said about actually that it might be great to have sort of welcoming spaces external to even the estuary. To beyond the estuary, there's a wild sea, but actually there are shallows in the sea that, you know, can welcome people into and put a lighthouse there type thing that points to the shore. And I think one of these things that we mustn't be so America-centric that people like Joe and Ginger Bill, who are in Europe, and I believe there are Australians as well, who I don't normally talk to because they're 12 hours away from me. You know, they also need to be brought in so that there is a 24-hour watch on that outpost.
Right.
That the lighthouse, the light of the lighthouse is on 24/7, so to speak.
I feel like that's very important as well. So if you're going to take it into the physical, maybe like I said, it's easy to pick on the church because they have the space that's open.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe it can't be in the church. Maybe it's those church members who have those ideas are meeting outside of the church somewhere else. You know, and we have to look at that as a possibility too.
Yeah, I feel like that's maybe what I was trying hinting at, or I don't know. I think you completed that thought that I had a bit before with that.
I think it'll vary from place to place, depending on also how. I mean, if you had a mainstream church, maybe far more actually more interested in doing these things because they're actually not so locked in.
Right. That's a possibility too. That's why I say it's got to be from the outset. What I saw Paul saying is, I can't do it all.
Yeah.
You guys are going to have to go out there and do some of this. Okay, great. How do we take it into the physical? Well, it's going to look different everywhere that it goes. And sometimes it's going to be in a church, and sometimes it's going to be at the park, and sometimes it's going to be in this building because somebody has access to it. It's going to be all these different places, which is fine. It's just, for me, I thought, well, we could sit back and we could talk about this for months and months and months and not do anything, or we could just get out and do something. And I felt like that's what he was saying. It's like, go try. And if it fails, so be it, but at least you tried.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and when I was talking with Andrew, I was like, well, I could also try something, I'm at the University of Maine, so the college campus could be, a decent place to try this. But the thing is, my only fear is that you tend to get more what I like to call flaming potatoes. They go in and just go and like sort of wreak havoc on things. And I feel like that would be more likely to happen where I am in the college campus than somewhere where like Andrew is. He's just a normal, just a church in New Jersey. So you would get, in a sense, you'd get potentially more diversity. And another thing that I was thinking about is that, an adjunct to this is that the first like couple of meetings or so would be like the most important, because that's sort of when you set the tone for how things are going to proceed, how the culture is sort of going to go forward. And that's also why I'm afraid of the flaming potatoes, because if you get one on the first time, it's going to be, you might not be able to recover from that. So it's yeah,
But it's also laying ground rules, isn't it? High. I think when you get those people, it's laying the ground rules. It's actually having 3 or 4 folk there who you know and have already agreed.
mm-hmm. Yeah, you would have to have a couple of people that are already sort of on board with having something like that. And I feel like actually my priest who's at the Newman Center in Maine would actually, I think he would find this idea quite interesting. I think he would possibly go along with it. I would just need to find a couple other people that like the idea, that could have like maybe 5 or so people that, along with me and my priest, that would think that this idea would work, and then find some physical space. That would be the next, and then find some way to bring this to the public that would not be that would be appetizing in a sense to people who would want to engage with it. That would be, I think.
Well, I mean, you're up in Maine, and Maine is lobster fishing, and Jordan Peterson talks about lobsters all the time, so that's how you sell it.
Oh.
The Lobster Appreciation Society.
I have a little stuffed animal lobster right here, actually.
Hmm.
See, appreciate
There
it.
you go. You're halfway there.
He's right next to my little stuffed animal or like sort of figurine ninja guy. But yeah, I don't know. I mean,
It's just, even if the guys who you're sort of your heavies, not in a silly way, but if you decide that we're going to have a discussion in a sensible, rational way, and you have, like you say, the 3 or 4 guys who agree with you on that and come along, they don't need to stick around for the 4th or 5th one, because by the time you've done 3 or 2,
yeah,
you've established the culture of the group. And the
yeah,
flaming potatoes won't have if they try to
yeah,
just say, I'm sorry, this is not the group to do that. This is the group to rationally discuss it. If you have reasons and that you can argue through, then this is the place to be,
yeah,
and be calm and rational and peaceful, and not let them get away with it. I used to run a group online, a forum for people with arthritis, who are perpetually grumpy because they're in pain, a lot of pain.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of grumpiness on the thing. And as I took one guy aside in a DM chat and said, look, I said, it's fine to be grumpy, but it's not fine to be angry with people. And you know exactly, he'd been there long enough to know exactly where the line was and not to cross it, so he got himself banned, but just to be as nasty as possible inside the line. And I said, there's a rule in this country that if you become freeman of the City of London, you can drive your sheep across one of the main bridges into London every morning. And I said, but the mayor's very grateful that people don't, because although legally they could do it, you don't want people doing that. So you've got to establish your boundaries and say, even if you're near it and pushing near it the whole time, that isn't actually what we're here for. The lines aren't there to be pushed. The lines that we actually want to have a proper discussion inside. It's difficult. But hey, we all learn so much from doing these things and dealing with difficult people.
Yeah.
We grow as human beings by doing it. Someone once said life is suffering.
Well, and you see that in the main server already. Like when people come in with ill intentions, it doesn't take very long before they're gone.
Yeah.
So, that's a group that's already had hard boundaries set. And nobody kicks them out. They just realize that oh, there's some boundaries and I've crossed them. So it's time to leave.
And no one's responding to me in a nasty way. No one's actually no one's coming back at me to create the flame. There's no one blowing on my flame.
Yeah. I think that sometimes has happened before, but that's never really the intention for us. And I'm not going to say that we're all always perfect with that with the engagement of flaming potatoes. And I think going back to the first couple of meetings, I feel like, and it's after you market it, once you get the people, it's my other thought is how do you kick it off in a way? It's the thing is for me, I feel like the estuary is just such a big idea that I can't actually focus it into how would you start the conversation? How would you be okay, so we're all a bunch of people with varying opinions. You could sort of, of course you could start with a introductions, okay, we all know each other.
Do an icebreaker.
Yeah,
Have a topic ready.
Yeah, you do icebreakers, but then it's
if you brought a friend along, then you know what you've disagreed with that friend about in the past. Just pre-brief them and say, look, hey, I know that obviously, you're not going to get Sam Adams along, but I know that you struggle with Unitarians, but and can we just discuss that for a second, or something
I think
that allows you to have that sort of first thing.
I've never spoken to Guy other than over text. I've never spoken to Andrea other than the occasional the voice. on Discord, never spoken to her in person, so to speak. You and I have had a conversation. Well, we've spoken actually a lot, but I've never spoken to Tyler. I know he's on here, and uh, he'll be back on here pretty soon. But here's all these people that I've never spoken to personally for very long, and here we all are having this conversation.
Yeah.
Like I don't want to make it sound like it's easy, because it's not, because there are a lot of things that go into it, but sometimes it's easy as just sitting down in front of a camera, hosting a Zoom meeting, and just talking to people.
Yeah. I mean, well, the thing is, the one thing that I think unifies us pretty well is at least a familiarity with Jordan Peterson and Paul VanderKlay and that sort of culture around them. So that's, I think, the unifier. And the thing is, a lot of people don't know. Most people don't really know Paul VanderKlay. A few more people will know Jordan Peterson, but that
Yeah, and that's the big question: is how do you not know Jordan Peterson at this point?
Oh, quite easily.
A lot.
Quite easily. My wife doesn't know anything about Jordan Peterson except what I tell her.
yeah,
And I think what's interesting is that this is, we talk about churches, that this conversation now is only 20% female, whereas churches are sort of like 60 to 70% female.
I'm so glad to represent.
And I'm a foreigner, so there we go.
And Sam
I think
brought this up when he was talking with Paul the other day. The problem is it all surrounded Jordan Peterson, and then he got ill and he was away, and now it's like you're watching the discussions crumble to an extent. Like nobody talks about Peterson anymore, because for everything good that he did, then the illness hit, and then he was gone off the scene. And Sam was saying it can't be a meetup group about Paul VanderKlay, because what's going to happen when Paul VanderKlay decides to retire? And and that's what I said about Peterson. Is like a lot of people are like, oh, I can't wait for the second coming of Jordan Peterson, and it's like, why? Like, what's the point behind that? Like, Peterson did a lot of good things, but if you keep making this movement about him, then it's eventually going to fail again. It has to be about the ideas that he brought to the table.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I think the most important is how are we going to be able to embody, because the thing is, the Discord is a solid structure that was able to embody the culture first of Jordan Peterson and then second of Paul VanderKlay. And I think the important thing is how could we do that, and then how can we do that in the physical, in meetups and in-person stuff, and that's, I think, tougher, because we all, in a sense, did our homework before we came onto the Discord. We all went out and looked at and watched videos of Jordan Peterson. Then most people went to Paul, and then they were like, "Oh, look at this thing in the description, click," and then boom, they're in the server. So it's like that. I think is the harder part. Is how do you have the homework, and also then there's also like what I've noticed is similarities in personality. A lot of people on the server are very high in openness. If we want to go by trait 5, big 5. A lot of people I've noticed are high in openness, and that's at least like one of the biggest similarities is a lot of us are high in openness. really want to
Well,
scour
to
around. Yeah.
to the point of it being around a person, it definitely seems like it's easier to start a movement like with Jordan Peterson because of him. It's harder to start something with ideas. Like you need to have like a figurehead is helpful, and that's why the Jordan Peterson meetup groups were a good way to meet people, like-minded people who are wanting to be open. I know openness is a thing. I don't know about that one. About tackling people of other types of high, not in high in openness, I guess, in whatever. But yeah, I see the point of, well, it can't be about Jordan Peterson. I totally agree there, because if you make it, or sorry, Paul VanderKlay, I guess, is the one we're talking about. So if we were around Paul VanderKlay, or
both of them. Both of them.
both, yeah. So I get why we want to move away from it being about a person, but it's just so easy to point, oh, you know that guy, their ideas.
Yeah.
So come prepared. Like I get it. Like I get that, why that makes it easier, but then it just is a bit harder to know how to explain what you're doing. That's all.
Having a figurehead is sort of like a shortcut.
Yeah, exactly.
Definitely is. And I think one of the interesting things that Sam said was that it's difficult to have a book club if you don't keep reading. And actually, that's the danger of the Jordan Peterson thing and of Paul, is that actually they're one book, so to speak.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Oh, that's super dangerous. You're just there's that hero worship in the pedestal. I think I pulled.
But they're also done. They're also we've discussed that book now, and
Right.
I think one of the things about estuary is that it keeps refreshing with different people. So you've got one estuary, but the water that comes in and out from the sea is different, and the fish that come in and out from the sea are different each time. And you don't keep the fish from the sea in the estuary very long. They've got to be influenced, and you either turn them into salmon who go upstream and into the church, or they're going to be washed back out again. And I think what you'll see is whenever you get an estuary, you'll get a very high turnover of people coming in and out, and that's to be expected because there are some creatures that dwell in the estuary, but most creatures wash in and out pretty quickly and either go straight upstream or come back out again.
Well, and that's what
or they just hang out.
We want though, and that was my point behind I
agree.
So the Zoom meetings are for people like us that don't have a local meetup spot, and that's great. The Outpost itself is for exactly what you're talking about. It's I wish for people to come in from other places, wherever that is, and they mingle a little bit, and they either go upstream and into the main server, or they go back out into the saltwater and they say, hey, I found a place where people are talking about this stuff. Come join me. And then they come back. And then maybe they go upstream into the main server and maybe they don't. And that's okay. Like it's got to be that spot where they have the option to either go into the main server where there's lots and lots of deep conversation that's about to happen, or stay in the estuary for a little while, or go back out to the saltwater. Like it's
I have a question.
Between place.
So I sort of do think of bridges of meaning the main server as an estuary itself.
Of course it is, but it's a very large one.
And it is. That's what I wanted to get at. So this is like a bit of a safer place to open.
And on one step out almost. So it's like the estuary contains different. So I used to work on the Thames, and the Thames is what they call brackish. So if you drank the Thames, which I couldn't recommend, it's very muddy, but it is clean. If you drank the Thames, you'd actually get a tang of salt, but it's not like the sea, which is really fully salty. And I think what we're talking about is something a little further out towards the sea than that point in this of the estuary. There's a graduation from the pure fresh water through to salt, and it's not. There is
okay.
And to sort of continue with your book analogy, it's sort of like the estuary or the library that's always shuffling, always turning around different books. And I think that's sort of we want to have those, and we don't always want to have like the one book of Jordan Peterson and Paul VanderKlay. We want to have the book of I don't know, maybe a couple of Jewish people and a couple of Islamic, boom,
Right.
there's their book.
We've read the book of Peterson. We've read the book of Paul. Now we want to read the book of Andrea. We want to read the book of Sam Adams.
Well, I've already sort of done that.
Well,
yeah,
maybe some people haven't.
That's true.
And I think by getting new people in, that actually refreshes the whole thing. So people will come in with new Jordan Peterson things, with new Sam Adams things, and new Paul VanderKlay things. That's also part of the estuary. There is that refreshing,
right,
of people, of the new, and then say, oh yeah, we talked about that 3 weeks ago. Isn't actually what you want to say at that point.
Right. Yeah. Well, I have another question because I think you may have answered it a little bit with regards to what this is for, but like Charlie, I am in, like, I mean, I know it's Canada, but still, it's a city is a city.
Sorry, another foreigner.
Yeah, I technically, yeah. So I mean, I'm in a big city, and I'm not sure that this estuary is for me then, because I am someone who could go make my own in where I live. So that's why I'm like,
And we'd like you to.
Here. Well, no, but like that's another thing is I am already part of too many things. Like I have a ladies' Bible study that we have actually cultivated from different churches. We are, and it's estuary-esque, but it isn't because there's no non-believers. But it is not affiliated with any church. No one's asking us to keep it going but ourselves. We meet Thursday nights at different people's houses. And so and we're very open to different ideas. Again, there's no non-believers, so it's not quite exactly the same, but it is like, that's my little church, like my evening church with the ladies. And so I have that, and I am part of this community, and I have my YouTube channel that I'm running, and and I have 3 children, and school starting, and so it's just, I'm not gonna make an estuary anytime soon, just time-wise. So there's that. So I'm like, well, I don't want to be like, so I'm just gonna hang out here since I don't feel like doing it. It's not feel, but since I'm busy. So is that okay? But I'm not sure if maybe I missed the meaning of what you meant, Charlie, for this to be. If you're like, no, it's okay if you're here on the server, just the Zoom meetings are for the people who can't find others.
I don't want to limit the scope to that, because is it feasibly possible for you right now to go out and create a online meetup? And I would say the answer is no. I would say you're much like Paul in that you've upgraded from a dinner plate to a platter, and that platter's now full too. And it's like, like for you, it's not feasibly possible. Look at Andrew. He's a college student. Like, how feasibly possible is it for him right now to go out and create that space where he is? Maybe it is.
Or feasible.
Maybe it isn't.
It's possible.
Okay, so it's possible, but is it feasible? Maybe in the short term it's not. Maybe in the long term it will be.
Yeah.
But
And that's also why
he has a space.
Yeah, and that's sort of why I wanted to go on here, is to sort of figure out how we could, in a sense, document what's going on with Discord and figure a way to transplant it and, put it in to different environments. And I also wanted to read something that Tyler wrote a little while ago in the chat. I sort of mentioned how the estuary is a little bit like a meta idea, and then Tyler said it's similar to John Vervaeke's notion of a meta psychotechnology. An estuary is sort of like name for a meta culture or protocol that we've already sort of been practicing on the Discord. And so it's how do we transplant that meta culture, and how do we sort of, we can't really regiment it into very strict protocols. I think that would destroy it a bit, and you wouldn't be able to move it around to different places because it's going to look different in different environments. And it's not going to be the same. Like if I build an estuary here, it's not going to be the same if it's in Arizona or Oregon or something like that. So I think that's an important thought.
I think it is, and for me, and this is what I said from the beginning when Paul started talking about estuary. It's like, okay, you want to be able to take something that has a proven track record and is a blueprint for taking that. It's like track houses. There's one single blueprint for, all the houses on the street. All of them that are going to be 3-bedroom, 2-bath, have the same blueprint. Okay. So that blueprint shows how we build the next one, and the next one, and the next one. Okay, well, here's a very loose blueprint. Sure, it's an online thing, but they also have a local meetup in Sacramento. So it's like both of these things together. It's like, okay, now we can take that as a blueprint, a very loose one, and say, put it in Maine, put it in Arkansas, put it here, put it here. And so we have to be, but somebody has to be able to articulate what that loose blueprint is and why that blueprint worked and why we want it to work in our local area. And that's how you're going to build these places in the physical, is somebody has to go out and articulate that.
But the thing is, the first blueprint had invoked the name Jordan Peterson.
Right.
Right?
This is true. That's why I said it's a loose blueprint.
Yeah.
Like, okay, this is how this whole thing got started.
We have to loosen the blueprint a bit.
Yeah, and having a group called Struggling with the Meaning Crisis isn't going to hack it on your university campus.
Yeah. No, that wouldn't work. Because they wouldn't
And that's the difficulty, I think, at the moment, that
they wouldn't
calling
want
it
to
estuary is
accept that.
fine. For internal people, we understand what that means in a way, but I don't think we've yet got an external name that we can actually go to people with. And if I went on to a meetup or whether I signed up and spent vast amounts of money on trying to get people to come to my meetup, and failed. But it was calling it a Jordan Peterson discussion group actually brought the 5 or 6 people in who came, and the 25, 30 other people who said they would come but never turned up. That got them in because Jordan Peterson at the time was the name that got them in. It was the brand that they recognized. It was the Taco Bell or whatever else you're going to call it. But today we don't have that Taco Bell. We don't have
the litmus
sort
test.
of,
Are you one of the types of people who think things that I think are cool that I also want to discuss things with?
Yeah.
We have enough content to be able to point them to. It's the thing. It's like we can point them to Sam Adams' channel, Transfigured, and say, look how many different people he's talked to. Like, look at these ideas that he's willing to talk about. Come over here, look at Paul VanderKlay stuff. Look at Andrea's stuff. Look at all these places where people are having these difficult discussions. And
but there's no "Make America Great Again," "Get Brexit done" type slogan. That's you need something that people quickly can focus on and get in, and that's quite difficult indeed. And I think for Andrew, if I was starting an on-campus one, I don't know what I would do. Would I, you may. Woke from the Meaning Crisis might be actually a great title for it, because that would invoke the wokeness thing that's going on. People would be interested in that.
That is funny.
You might get the wrong people.
Yeah.
No, and it's the kind of thing that there's a friend that we might reach out to who is not a believer, but happy to talk about things that we might not to necessarily join, but to like join in the less, like in the outings and stuff. Like she's the neighbor of one of the girls. So, I mean, that's something that I have to think about that I'm going to discuss with my group.
But that's what you run a social once a quarter for, isn't it? To get people who aren't, so they can invite their friends.
So that's what do you mean by
Do
that?
you run a social once a quarter?
But it's
So every
once a week.
13th. I know, but every quarter you run a social in the group.
Oh yeah. Oh okay. Like
That's
a
so.
social what? Oh, you mean like an event? Okay, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
we
so
try to do
a
yeah.
tea
So
party
we're
once a.
thinking of doing something like we try to do things like that. Yeah, I don't know if it's quite as regimented, but
Yeah.
yeah. So we do yeah non specific things. We still discuss things though. So
Yeah.
we're
But
thinking of maybe
it's over cups of tea and it's got a bigger group
yeah
that can be invited in, and
yeah.
we do
So
that. So
that would
cycling
be
is a
like that
major
kind of
thing in the
a
UK
thing.
at the moment, and so our church, the biggest way to get men into our church, although they actually never go into the building, is to run a cycle ride on
Okay.
a morning that ends up in a pub with a meal.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, it could be partial. I can like get an estuary-esque parts to it, so that's definitely plausible. But and I think we probably will end up doing that. But yeah, I just am like overwhelmed with school starting soon right now.
You got 3 kids. I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
I'm just glad all my 3 darlings have grown up and gone away.
Well, and
Love
there's
them, I
even
do a
the,
lot,
like,
but
yeah, and it's even and that's one of the things that I love about the Bridges of Meaning group is on the online aspect. And I'm even part of a another channel's community that's a bit smaller that has about 100 people on it, and it's called Sorting Myself Out, and it was started by like a Jordan Peterson thing as well, but now it's become its own. And I play Dungeons and Dragons with them on Sundays. And yeah, I know it's awesome. Yeah, we're really cool. But no, but I actually really love it. And not all like there's only about 4 of us, and like one of the guys is like agnostic. So and we talk about lots of things, and I kind of am like that's kind of estuary-esque.
that
So
that
there's
is estuary.
yeah,
That's
because
pretty
you
much
have to
almost
think about
defines it.
it. Yeah, it's like, well, I guess that kind of is one, but I'm like, not kind of. No, it is. You just have to. I just sort of have to wrap my mind around the different things because it seems like, but it must be specific and have that as the name, and it's like, no, it doesn't have to. It can just be in your goings in different groups. Preach the gospel. Like,
Yeah,
like,
I think it's actually useful to bring up John Vervaeke. I think you sort of mentioned a guy because I feel like his ideas are very useful in this context because he's not in a church really. He's a heterodox guy more or less, and that's a useful frame to build off of. Of course, so is Jordan Peterson in a sense. So we can't have him really as a figurehead. There's no figurehead. That's
right.
sort of like our first rule. We can't have any shortcuts, and I feel like, but his ideas are useful, and we have to, I guess, figure out an amalgam, useful ideas, and then somehow make them work. And yeah, I don't know, but I think John Vervaeke is a useful person to have.
Charlie, are you going to have with regards to like this space, are you going to do like Zoom meetings is it every week or
That's my plan. Yeah.
and like are you going to do other types of events? I mean, I don't know. I'm wondering like what your plan is for is it like, will it just be different topics every week kind of thing? Or will it just be whatever people want to talk about?
I plan on putting out a survey like at the beginning of the week to say, okay, like what does everyone want to talk about? And kind of polling and trying to get topics in that people want to discuss. Because maybe
Okay.
that's what happened in Wisconsin a couple nights ago. And like, I want people to be able to discuss that openly. All the ideas that they're feeling about it. And just that piece. Or maybe they want to talk about something completely different. And that's okay too. You know, both of us have 3 kids, and my kids just started school Monday. Okay. Maybe one time a topic is, how do we feel about kids going back to school during all this? And, you know, what does that mean? And, you know, it's just a place where we poll, and whatever topics people want to talk about, we just work through them.
Okay.
Oh, I've got to go. I've suddenly realised I've got something on an hour. I've got to get it organised. Another Zoom meeting, surprisingly.
All right, we'll see you.
Nice meeting
God
you
bless all.
guys.
But yeah, I mean, it's just that, you know, and that may sound like trying to herd cats, and if that's the case, okay, whatever. But you know, it's that place where everyone just talks about it openly, because sometimes it doesn't come across in text chat the same way that we would like it to.
Oh, I think it's nice having people. Okay, because I haven't been on the Verbaki server, but funny story. When I joined it, and then I was like, okay, I'll look at it later, and I don't know why. I need to look into his stuff because I don't know his stuff well enough to feel like I can join in with the talking about his ideas. So that's why I just haven't really explored it. But I was always so annoyed with all the at everyone things that they would do. But rather then later I was like, oh wait, they're just really like plugged in to doing stuff together. Like, you know, like I was like, oh man, stop like being so community oriented with your at everyone. Like, you know, like that wasn't as like I was annoyed, but I didn't quite like it didn't dawn on me till later. Why are they adding everyone all the time? Because they have things to do together all the time. Like they're providing so many things for people to bond over and to see each other and to do together. And I was like, oh, that's cool. Actually, I shouldn't be so annoyed.
Yeah, they took a really bad situation and just decided like, oh, we're going to do something really good with it. Like we can't all meet in person, but man, the amount of virtual events they host is like, it's crazy.
But I'm like, they're going hard at the community like idea. Like that's what I think is, and again, I don't know. This is literally just for me observing how many ad everyone's they're doing. But I think that I know that since it's a non-religion religion, they're like, we need rituals and we need to perform them. So we need to, otherwise it just fizzles out. So that's what I'm guessing is happening, that they're like, we got to do this stuff, otherwise people will be unfulfilled. Like, I don't know, I'm just totally guessing, and I might like someday venture to try to talk to some of them, but I was thinking like, oh, okay, well then I was like, maybe Bridges of Meaning should have more events. But it feels like we like with Paul talking every Friday, that's really cool, and I like that. And I think I'm gonna try to stay after those talks for chatting with people, just to have face to face, like you were saying. And then like, you know, there's this, but I also am part of the book club that Sherry started. So there are some things, but I think that it would be cool to talk and see people instead of having it always be text, because you don't really know people as well when it's nice to see their faces.
Right, and
Yeah,
that's
they're
why
actually-
I say, like, I want people to just bring up topics that they're, you know, that whatever is going on that week, like, what are they what are they thinking about? How do they feel about this? How do they feel about that? And not just do it through text chat, but be able to speak face to face with other people about why that matters to them.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and they're actually doing something right now. They're watching the Paul, Jonathan Pajot, and Vervaeke discussion.
Oh, is that
So, yeah,
out? Oh, I saw them tweeted about it yesterday.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
yeah.
Oh,
So
I'm
it's
glad
like,
that they're doing something as a group.
and so yeah, they have a good thing going on there. But the thing is, there's always a danger with having, I feel like, a lot of structure. So I'm sort of like thinking about more so the Weinstein server. They had a lot of things going on that they were very. The thing is, they were very ambitious, and that can be a bit of a downfall. They had things going. They had like projects and stuff, and they were actively working on things. But eventually, I think a couple people were just like something snapped or whatever, and just poof. And there was a branch that popped off.
Yeah, no. I've heard that they've splintered.
Yeah,
I've talked to someone about this who is was part of them, and she's also on Vervaeke's and this and Bridges of Meaning, and also on the Sorting Myself Out one, and we were talking about it,
yeah,
and she was like, yeah, it's because they're not in tune with like logos. Or like, they're not in tune with the truth, and it's a bunch of alpha little 20-something-year-old alpha males trying to be like, there's no hierarchy, but like sorting a hierarchy out, and then it splinters because they're trying to like pretend like it does, like, no, we're above that evolutionarily, we can choose to be above it, but then it's just like you keep denying it, and then they broke apart. So that was her explanation, which I thought was kind of cool. But
yeah,
yeah, I
yeah,
did hear about that.
yeah. My thought is that they were a bit ambitious with things, but I also just I wasn't very interested in Weinstein in general.
Yeah,
I
and
was just like,
they had different things that they were focusing on. Like the center isn't
yeah,
the same as Bridges and other
yeah.
ones.
He's too left brain for me. Too much
Mm.
math. Hurts.
yeah, Brett's an interesting cat, but Eric's okay in my opinion, but
Eric's Twitter, I never understand anything he writes.
I don't go on Twitter, so I've solved the problem there.
There you go.
I don't have in 6 months maybe since the last time I was on Twitter.
I have an account, but I only use it if I want to look at one tweet or something that people post on the
Right, yeah.
That's all I use it for. And then that's it. So, but oh, yeah, it's the building an estuary is going to be a not really a problem to solve, but an interesting puzzle to put together, because it's like I feel like the Discord was like a 500-piece puzzle, and this is like a 2,000-piece puzzle. there's I feel like there's way more aspects when the goal is to put it into a physical environment.
Oh yeah. Well, there's a commitment.
There's a
Like the
commitment.
commitment is like, I kind of still can't believe that I have my ladies Bible study / but it's like Bible study / book club. Like that's how I describe it, because we don't do official Bible studies. We choose a book. Tim Keller is sometimes other, like we were supposed to do this one, The Way of the Pilgrim, but we decided to just actually take a break over the summer and just have hangout meetups. But yeah, we always, discuss a book. But I'm surprised that, like, I mean, these ladies, and they all have families, and it's like we still meet every Thursday night. So yeah, I'm just like, and it's a commitment, but you got to find people who are like, yeah, I'm willing to.
Yeah, and that's the hard part. I'm trying to find people who will make that commitment and say, I'll be there
Mm-hmm.
because I want to talk about these things. Whatever the topics are for the week, just I want to talk about it. I'm committed. I'll be there.
Mm-hmm.
So
Oh, and speaking of that commitment wise, I don't know that I could commit to the Zoom meetings. I hope that's okay, Charlie.
Well, that's fine.
Like, yeah, again, like, because I'm part of, okay, I literally have a book club on Thursday at 4:30, and then the ladies Bible study at 7:30. That's 2 things on Thursday. And then on Sunday I have my Dungeons and Dragons group. And so yeah, I am not sure if my plate is too full or not. But like I don't know what the policy is like for dropping in. Do you have a policy of like, oh, it's okay if you can't commit but pop by, or like if you can't, don't bother? I don't know.
nope. If you want to pop in, just go for it.
Okay.
Like this thing is ebbed and flowed today. People came in, people had to leave. That's fine too. It really doesn't make a difference to me. Like if you want to pop in and say, hey, I can only hang out for 20, 30 minutes, go for it.
Okay. Cool. Good to
The only
know.
thing I will make you aware of is that I plan on posting them to my YouTube channel for people that can't be in on the Zoom meetings.
Right.
And so, like, if you miss it and you want to watch it later, that's fine too.
Okay. Cool.
Awesome.
Okay, well, speaking of, I think I'm gonna go then.
Yeah.
So
All right, we'll see you later, Andrea.
yeah, thanks for hosting this, Charlie. This was informative. So yeah.
See you.
Okay, see you. Bye.
Bye bye. Well, I think I'm out of ideas. So,
Yeah, me too. I think I accomplished what I set out to. So, well, until next week.
yeah.
All right,
See ya.
we'll see you, Andrew.